big screen. I asked Robert Spencer about this very thing, why he's not really taking on the Quran, and he made very clear that that is not his area of expertise. But this is your area of expertise, Quran. So thank God that you've come on board and are able to do something that people like Robert Spencer or myself cannot do. So over to you. Go ahead and let's unpack these four references.
Back in 2012, Robert Spencer and David Wood debated Anjem Chowdhury and Omar Bakri on ABN Set. The title of the debate was Did Muhammad Exist? The only argument presented from the Muslim side was Muhammad definitely existed because the Quran says so. This is a circular argument, but this is not the problem. The idea is, did the Quran say so? In this presentation, we will take a deeper look at the only four mentions of Muhammad in the Quran, and who do they really refer to? And I must say that Ahmad is not the same as Muhammad. If I went into a room and said Ahmad, the Muhammads will not look at because they know that they're not the same.
Let me ask you, jump in here real quickly, Quran. Isn't Ahmed a diminutive of Muhammad? Aren't they? It's not that it's the same word, but isn't it a diminutive like Joe is diminutive of Joseph?
They say it's from the same root, which is Hamad, and I have no problem. But you see, the word Ahmad, we do not see it in the history. It has no historicity. Muhammad was never referred to as Ahmad, either in the tradition or in other outside literature. So this is problematic.
In the Quran, in chapter 7, verse 157, and chapter 61, verse 6, you have the reference to Ahmed. That is not Muhammad there, even in the Quran. Then.
Yes, exactly.
So
But
you
this
see
is
both in the Quran in that case, which is not one of the four we're looking at today, that also is not Muhammad.
yes, so I'm not including here what Ahmad means because this is a separate study. Here only the four references to the word Muhammad. This is in the presentation.
Okay?
Now, Christoph Luxemburg, he presentation, I will be using my own literal translation of the Quran. I didn't translate the whole of the Quran, just some crucial verses. I take it word for word. So now I will see how strong is Luxemburg's hypothesis. Who are the Muhammads in the Quran? So before I go on, I will ask you if you want to comment before I start with full reference.
No, this sounds good. This is what we're waiting for. We've known about these four references. It's fascinating that there are only four. You would think there'd be, if he is so important, he would be right through the Quran in the Arabic text. We know that there are multiple, almost around 90, 93 references to Islam. Why is Muhammad so few, or is so few? And you're saying it's even fewer than that. In fact, what you're gonna let us know is there is zero references to him. I assume by the time we finish this recording.
Okay, so here we have the four Quranic references, and I will look at each one of them and examine them. Do they match Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, 100% or not? The first reference is in Surah 47, verse 2. This is not the traditional sequence. I'm just taking it from another sequence. It says, and those who believed and did righteous deeds and believed then we sent down Muhammad and they the truth from their Lord, removed from them their sins and amended their condition. This is what it says. Okay, so when we look at this surah, the name of the surah is Muhammad. This is one of the main points that the Muslims argue. How can we have a whole surah called Muhammad and this guy doesn't exist? Well, this surah is named Muhammad, but that doesn't matter because it is not 100% sure, since the Islamic sources mention that it used to be called Surah of Fighting, which is Surah of Qital. These are other traditions. This is believable since other surahs also underwent a name change, like Surah 17. Naming the surahs is a later invention, and say the beginning of the surah coheres nicely with the ending of the surah before, but it seems that it was butchered into a new separate surah without any logical meaning. It has been renamed later to historicize Muhammad, just like Surah 17 has been renamed to Al-Isra, meaning the night journey, to historicize this event. But if you look at Surah 17, if you read it just with a critical eye, you will find that it says his servant in the beginning. It never says Muhammad. So this is a critical point. This was about the name. Now, if you want to comment Dr. Smith, so that I go to what the verse actually says.
Well, I think this is fascinating, Mel, if you could jump in as well, because here you have this, the only comeback really that this has to be Muhammad is that the entire chapter is named Muhammad. Therefore, how can you have a chapter name without of the man himself without saying that this verse is about him? And you're saying that chapter name is a later inclusion. That is, and that is the case with all of the surahs. All the earliest manuscripts do not have surah names. Uh, it makes sense, therefore, that these are added at a later date. And what I think is fascinating, Quran, you're also bringing out that the reason that the later names are even added is because people needed to create a historicize. You're saying that they need to put this in the history. So this put Surah 17, you're looking at verse 1, where he is going, this used to talk about fighting, but now it talks about him going up to the seven heavens to be an Hajj. And so they had to put that in there to talk about that event that's in verse 1. Of course, that's a later addition. In the same case, Muhammad, they had to have the name Muhammad. They had to back to this must be Muhammad. So they put the name of the surah at a later date. To me, that's a no-brainer, and to me it seems obvious to me. What do you think, Mel?
Yeah, I think the fact that they've changed the title is a way of making sure that the reader interprets the text in a certain way, the way that they want the reader to interpret it. When you take away the title, the text itself becomes weaker, and we find other examples of interpolations in the
Muhammad itself is not on solid ground. That's what I'm saying.
Uh-huh. Kata. You're right. Kata. So you're talking about the fight that was the name. And so why did they change it? What was the reasoning? I'm guessing because they needed to have Muhammad there as a historical figure. They realized they only have 4 references to him, so they create a whole surah instead of a fighting Dekazala and put Muhammad as a to represent that and to make it a stronger argument.
If you make it appear to be a whole chapter about Muhammad, that suddenly brings a single verse to become a whole chapter. So that strengthens the case for Muhammad. So that's what they're at.
Exactly. Now I can look at the verse now. What does it actually say? Now, here the verse says, and those who believed and did righteous deeds and believed in what has been sent down upon Muhammad, and it is the truth from their Lord, removed from them their sins and amended their condition. Now, the word sins, I translated it as such. You will find in the English translation, it will be bad deeds, it will be something like this. But actually, this is the same word that the Christian use in the Arabic. It's remove their sins. That's what it actually says. And could this be an indication to the sacrifice that Jesus did? And I will ask you, Dr. Smith and Mel, did Muhammad ever remove sins? Is this part of the Islamic theology?
No, no.
I would say no. I would say that it tells us that Muhammad was the sinner himself, so he was no better in a position to remove his other sins than his own sins, so not much good there.
Now this is an interesting argument you're bringing up, because what you're saying here is the word for sins, though they say bad deeds in a lot of the English translations, you're saying this is the same word that the Christians use in the Arabic Bible for sins. So we really should be consistent. Obviously, if you are consistent, that has to be remove their sins, which is, as Mel said, this is something Muhammad never did. How could someone in chapter 48, verse 1 and 2, who asked forgiveness for his sins before he was a prophet, and has to ask forgiveness for the sins he does even as a prophet, how could someone 164 and chapter 53, verse 38 of the Quran, it's very clear that nobody else can take on the sins of another. That's so clear, and that is attacking the idea that we're taking on the sins of Adam and Eve. But in this case, if that is the situation, just by looking at the verse it's just in front of us, how could that be Muhammad? That must be referring to someone else or something else. In this case, it is someone else. And what you're saying, Murad, is this Muhammad, not the person, is actually Jesus Christ. Now, it's be fascinating how you get to that, but I'm going to leave it over to you. God bless you. That's a great point.
Yes. As Christoph Luxemburg said, that there was two Muhammads, one which was the original, which was Jesus, another way of saying Jesus, and then came the Arabian prophet. This is a later invention. So this was about the first verse. The second verse, we will have to put in some background first. We have to look at the Dayat Sarut. What is the Dayat Sarut? The Dayat Sarut is the most prominent early gospel harmony ever created by Tatian, an Assyrian early Christian apologist and ascetic. The idea of a gospel harmony is actually to take the four gospels and to put them into one narrative. Tatian sought to combine all the texture, material he found in the four gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, into a single coherent narrative of Jesus' life and death. Tatian's work became the standard text of the four Gospels in the Syriac-speaking churches until the 5th century, after which it gave way to the four separate Gospels in the Peshitta version. Peshitta is actually a word that it became Arabized, also became Basita, meaning simple. It's the Syriac version of the Bible, of the New Testament.
What words did you say it meant? Because you broke up there.
Peshitta means simple. It's the same as the Arabic Basita.
Okay.
So now when we look at the verse, we want to examine what does it say. It says, Muhammad, messenger of see them bowing and prostrating, seeking bounty from Allah and His pleasure. Their mark is on their face from the trace of prostration. That is their description in the Torah, and the description in the Gospel is as a plant which produces its offshoots and strengthens them so they grow firm and stand upon their stalks, delighting the souls, so that Allah may enrage by them the disbelievers. Allah has promised those who believe and did righteous deeds, among them forgiveness and a great reward. Now, Christoph Luxemburg says that the word Muhammad, it means the one who is blessed. Now, if we try and say, blessed be the messenger of Allah and those who are with him, it will make better sense.
It's interesting to me, Murad, and go back to that if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
because that idea of the blessed one, this is the one that they Muslims always try to say that Psalm of Solomon 5:16, the blessed one, Muhammad, which is in the Hebrew there, they would like to change to Ahmad. In some ways, that you're doing the very same thing they're doing, but you're saying actually that this makes absolute sense. The blessed one, in the messenger of Allah, or blessed be the messenger of Allah. To me, it makes a lot more sense in this context than the way that they have said as Muhammad, messenger of Allah, those with him, as the Muslims today would like to put it. And so it's fascinating that we're kind of reversing we're reversing roles here, aren't we? Because Muslims, I've had to argue that Muhammad is not Ahmed, and Hemdan would probably be a much more correct way in Hebrew of rendering the Ahmed of in the Old Testament. What you're saying here, the blessed one, which is really what should be the way that this is translated, has been rendered to a person called Muhammad, which doesn't fit really the context.
I also want to jump in and just point out here we see Allah providing forgiveness. And in the earlier verse, we saw that it was Muhammad that took away sins, suggesting that Allah and Muhammad are one and the same, which obviously can't
that in the Psalm